Let's bring in MS Now senior national security reporter David Rode, Rick Stengel, former Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs and an MS Now political analyst, and founder of and president of the Marks Collaborative, retired Major General James Spider Marks. David, the president had described some of the attacks the U.S. launched on Iran last night as love taps. What is CENTCOM describing them as?
They're describing them as sort of deadly fire that was in response to a deadly attack on American ships. It was 3 American destroyers. They were making their way through the Strait of Hormuz. It was an American show of force. Iranian forces attacked them. Either the missiles from Iranian forces missed or drones missed, or the U.S. was able to shoot them down. These destroyers are amazing. They have incredible radar systems that can literally see a bird flying in the distance. So that's a successful military operation, and then the U.S. retaliated and hit some bases on land and other locations where the Iranians were firing at the Americans from. That's a significant exchange of fire. To me, that is a violation of the ceasefire, but I think the president is so eager, critics say desperate, for a deal here that he keeps playing down these potentially deadly clashes between U.S. and Iranian forces.
David Rode, thank you so much for laying out the very latest for us. Rick, the president did acknowledge that Iran fired on 3 U.S. warships transiting through the strait, and he wrote on social media right after, "We'll knock them out a lot harder and a lot more violently in the future if they don't get their deal signed fast." What does fast even mean? How long is the U.S. willing to wait?
Well, Anna, it's just another example of Trump's usual bluster and rhetoric, thinking that he's going to get a deal because he's using such exaggerated talk. David's point that our retaliation, there's kind of been an understanding, I hope, between the two sides that, you know what, we're going to retaliate, but not to such an extent that it will blow up the talks. We've seen that with Iran before. But, both sides are kind of desperate for a deal. And I do think that the negotiations, in a way, what we have seen is when you're negotiating, you can't come to an agreement. You either make it bigger, you either make it smaller, or you kick the can down the road. And basically, that's the third option, is what they're doing. They're kicking the can down the road. They're going to say, look, we haven't come to an agreement yet about Iran's nuclear capacity. We're going to negotiate on that for the next few months. Both sides, it's in the interest of both sides to make a deal, and that's why they're going to postpone deciding on some aspects of it.
General, according to the Washington Post, a confidential CIA analysis finds Iran can survive the U.S. naval blockade for at least 3 to 4 months before facing more economic hardship, citing 4 people familiar with the document. And this assessment also finds Iran retains a substantial missile and drone arsenal. Does that surprise you?
Well, it doesn't at all. The fact that Iran has continued to be incredibly resilient, demonstrated this level of resilience over the course of the last 2 months, should not be surprising. Again, I think the United States established an expectation of what would occur as a result of Epic Fury that really extended our abilities to achieve that objective. On the military side, we've achieved some significant objectives, but I think we've learned a lesson at this point that additional firepower against Iran, in other words, a resumption of Epic Fury phase 2 now, is not going to move the negotiations any place closer or get us together to some type of an off-ramp. Clearly, I think, to answer your previous question, I think what Trump would love to do is walk into the room and see Xi next week, shake his hand and say, "Oh, just FYI."
Donald Trump just gave his favorite propaganda channel an exclusive on previously sealed UFO videos, and of course people of influence are questioning his motives at this moment in time. I have the breaking story and the videos for you next. Let's begin with the chorus that has erupted, and it won't take out-of-this-world intelligence to spot the common thread. And on the other side, I'll have the Fox report with those videos.
The UFO disclosure topic, in my opinion, is being designed as a major distraction. I think it's the cosmic false flag. I think that they're recruiting the Christian pastors to try to get them to convince people of, whatever government narrative they're going to put out about these aliens to distract you, get everybody talking about that.
Trump talking about declassifying all the UFO info. Because, by the way, we're in a war with Iran. The Epstein files, the rest of them are not going to see the light of day. There's going to be no prosecutions. There's going to be no... They're not even going to investigate any of that. That's all going away. Gas prices are dramatically rising. The cost of food is rising. Everything's going up. And the last thing that they have here is to basically go, and there's alien bases under the water.
And Marjorie Taylor Greene posted, the most transparent administration in history still hasn't released all the Epstein files or arrested anyone, but rolled out some UFO files today so you would get so excited that you forgot you're paying over $4.50 per gallon because they are fighting another foreign war they said they would no longer fight. Happy Friday, everyone. And I really don't care about the UFO files. I just don't. Unless they roll out live aliens and test demo UFOs, or actually admit what we know this really is, then I have way better things to do on this Friday. And here's Republican strategist Angie Wong soft-selling the disclosure as a much-needed distraction.
So there are those who think this is all a bit of political theatre, perhaps even a shiny object or a distraction to make us think about something apart from the Iran war. What do you say to that?
Well, politically, you always use aliens to kind of distract you and stare at this shiny object instead of what's actually happening on the ground. That's always been the political play. And I'm not saying that that's the case here. I think that President Trump really does want these files to get out. Whether or not they're going to be as salacious as we all want them to be, maybe not. But you can't ignore that there's been earthquakes happening in Area 51. That's been reported. There's been all sorts of weird activity with the scientists studying aliens, UFOs, and alike. They have all been either silenced or something's going on there. So there's a lot of mystery around all of this. And if this is a great distractor, that's fine, because, you know, we do need something to unite us as human beings again. So I think, you know, even though it might sound very political and it may sound dark in science fiction, we do need some sort of common denominator that's going to bring human beings back together again, rather than just constantly bickering between right and left. So this might be the catalyst.
And now have a seat on that alien implant of yours and fix your eyes on the Fox report that shows the unexplained mysteries zipping across our skies.
Fox News alert, the Trump administration releasing the first batch of files related to UFOs and alien life.
So is the truth really out there?
So a White House official left this hard drive on my desk overnight. You can see on it, it says AARO files copy 203. That is the all domain resolution office copy 203. This is the first big batch of UFO disclosure ordered by President Trump. Some of the clips and videos on there have popped up different places before. Some of them have not. And we have been going through this all morning and overnight to try to put together some of the best videos so we can all look at this together.
The gap between the Trump administration is saying publicly about this war and what the intelligence community apparently believes privately has become so wide that it is generating its own news cycle. It is not through social contradiction, but through leaks from people inside the system who have concluded that the distance between the official narrative and the classified reality is no longer sustainable. Sanctum's description of the exchange in the strait, missiles, drones, small boats targeting US destroyers, is clinical and serious. These are not provocative gestures. These are coordinated military attacks on American naval vessels that were intercepted by someone of the most sophisticated radar and missiles defense system in the world. That they were successfully defended against is a tribute to the capability of the US Navy. That the president described them as love taps on a phone call with ABC News is a tribute to something else entirely. Rick Stangel's framing that both sides are somewhat desperate for a deal but kicking the can because they can't bridge the core issues is probably the most accurate read of where the negotiations are actually. The nuclear question hasn't been resolved. The strait question hasn't been resolved. What's happening in a managed de-escalation that neither side can call a victory and neither side wants to call a defeat, so they are calling it a ceasefire and hoping the label holds long enough for something to exchange. General Spidermark's assessments of the GCC bifurcation is the strategic pictures that most of the political coverage is missing. The Gulf Cooperation Council is not a monolithic bloc, and this war has exposed the fault lines. The UAE and Israel, with their hardline posture toward Iran, representing one axis. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, possibly Turkey, and Pakistan, with their historically more complex relationship with Tehran, represent another. That second grouping has potential as a moderating channel. Countries that have maintained working relationship with Iran and could theoretically function as intermediaries, but their willingness to play that role depends entirely on whether they trusted the United States to be a reliable partner, and the Project Freedom debacle has not helped that trust. The damage to U.S. military facilities being described as more extensive than publicly acknowledged is a significant data point. Iranian strikes described as pinpoint accurate against U.S. positions in the region suggests external intelligence support, and the most obvious candidate for that support is Russia, which has both the capability and an overwhelming incentive to see American military assets to degraded and American allies pushed toward alternative arrangements. The war has been a gift to Moscow in ways that seem to have been genuinely unmodeled by the people who made the decision to start it. The CIA's conclusion that additional firepower against Iran will not advance to negotiations is the professional intelligence community's way of saying the theory of victory doesn't work. Bombing your way to an Iranian capitulation was always the assumption. That sufficient military pressure would produce a decision calculus change in Tehran. What the accumulated evidence now shows in that Iran's leadership had a different theory, that it could absorb more military pain than a democratic government facing electoral consequence from 455 gas could absorb economic pain. That theory appears 7 days in to be correct.